So, hello everyone, and welcome to the Conversation Podcast. I have here with me my first guest ever, Dr. Mariana Brussoni. Thank you for joining us tonight.
It's a pleasure, David. Thank you for having me.
Your work is so important, like I was telling you earlier. Everything we're trying to achieve inside of a school setting, we end up using a lot of your work. So, I can't wait to talk about it. Could you let us know briefly what exactly that you are currently working on and what you're doing?
Well, sure, yeah. So I guess a bit of background is that I'm a developmental psychologist, and I've been doing injury prevention research for about 20 years. And it's been, I guess, about 10 of those that I've gotten more into outdoor and risky play kind of topics. And some people kind of wonder how is it that an injury prevention researcher ended up, encouraging children's risk and risk taking. And so, really, it was a concern that I had over the kind of approach that we were taking in injury prevention that saw risk as an unequivocally bad thing, as a danger or hazard, rather than kind of seeing the nuances around risk and also recognizing the developmental importance of risk for kids. So the work really stems out of that, is out of wanting to make injury prevention and really all of the public health stuff that we do more comprehensive, and thinking beyond just one field into really thinking holistically about kids and their needs.
Yeah, I like that. Risky play is what we all grew up doing, right? So, I've recently heard or read on Active for Life that they're trying to suggest changing risky play for adventurous play. Is there is there a difference between the two, or would that be an acceptable alternative to get parents wanting their children to do risky play?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a question that we've been grappling with for years. And where I've personally landed is that I use the term risky play, when I write in academia and most of the stuff that I do for lay audiences for a few reasons. One of them is that I want to make sure it, particularly for kind of injury prevention and public health, to differentiate between risk and danger or hazard, right? So
Mhm.
bringing risk back more to a neutral term, where they can be a positive or a negative outcome. And so I think it's really important to keep that word in the conversation. And what I found often is that you can use other words like even outdoor play or challenging play or adventure play, and that does, it sometimes does help get buy-in, but then as soon as risks come up, that people kind of shy away. So for
Mhm.
me, because I'm trying to have that conversation on the national level, and I have my privileged academic perch, I feel like it's up to me to really open up that conversation and push that conversation. However, for people who are really, on the ground working with parents, wanting to develop that consensus, you have to meet people where they're at, right? You can't just, take them too far forward because they'll stop listening, they'll shut down, they won't be able to kind of process. So if you need to start with gentler terms like outdoor play, even, that's fine. And then through continued conversations and dialogue, then you can move more towards getting them to open up their thinking around other types of possibilities.
That's interesting. I also think currently the term risky play as well, we need to put an emphasis on that it can change within the time. So if we're looking at our current situation, for me, I want my daughter to participate in risky play, but that risk, I've kind of stepped it back a little bit because I don't want her to be too risky right now. Like we don't want to end up going to the hospital or something like that. So um, has it changed recently just because the risks of getting hurt, let's say that in usual times, if someone were to break a bone, you would go to the hospital and they would fix it. But now you kind of want to avoid the hospitals if you can. Has it changed recently, or should it change? Is that an issue that you're dealing with?
Mm. Yeah, I think what's changed actually even more fundamentally than kids' ability to kind of have risky play experiences is even their opportunities to go outside, and let alone go outside and play. And so there's been different kind of guidelines in different jurisdictions. So some jurisdictions even, closing parks altogether. Others just
Hmm.
allowing you to use the path and don't step on the path. Just keep going, no lingering, and that's not how children play. Children need to linger, they need to have time to kind of explore what they want to do. And so my concern really recently has just been a more fundamental one of kind of advocating for children's access to just getting outside and playing.
Yeah, I think I saw that on your Twitter feed. Getting getting the city to maybe think differently in regards to letting kids play. Um, should they be playing outside right now? Is that a question you get asked a lot?
Yeah, as part of Outdoor Play Canada, we wrote a statement which you can find on outdoorplaycanada.ca, which was exactly about this issue. We were getting concerned, even at the beginning of this pandemic and the restrictions that were attached to, associated to the COVID pandemic, that people were confused and that they were getting mixed messaging, and they had the sense that they had to stay home and not even go outside. So we wrote this statement to really kind of clarify that and to advocate for those opportunities to stay open. And so there's a lot of really important reasons to get outside over and above all of the things we know about its benefits that are specific to this COVID era. So, for example, transmission of any virus is less likely outdoors than it is indoors. You've
Okay.
got kind of more open air, wind, et cetera, that just takes stuff away. You're not in as close contact with people in kind of dry indoor environments. It's also important because when kids are outside and when we're outside, we're more physically active than when we're inside. And physical activity is really, really important to keep our immune systems robust. And so that's, of course, important for helping fight COVID. And also that really there could be a tendency to feel isolated indoors. And so this is also an opportunity to connect with others, with our neighbors, obviously with that safe distancing 2 meter guideline. But to be able to see other people and interact with them can help with that feeling of isolation. And for kids in particular, play is a really important way for them to work through anxiety and trauma. And this is a very anxious and traumatic time. And so we really need to do whatever we can to support kids being able to access these opportunities right now.
Yes, I imagine that kids feel the anxiety. There's just something in the air. I know my 4-year-old daughter seems to be having a few more tantrums, different things like that. So I think kids definitely feel that there's something in the air. We're open about what's going on with our daughter. We're telling her that you can't give hugs to your neighbor when you see him. Um, but there's definitely a bit of anxiety there, I believe. So play is very important. So it's very hard for parents to navigate that, to keep in mind what's healthy for the child and to keep them safe from COVID.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, once schools open up again, like once society finds its groove again, what are ways that schools can integrate play? What kind of play can they integrate, and what are ways that they can integrate those types of play?
Mm. Well, it's been really interesting lately. So, for example, Denmark recently opened their elementary schools to children, and there's talks of other jurisdictions doing the same. And in Denmark, for example, they specified that the kids had to be outside for schooling.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of a sudden they're pushing, even teachers who might not have explored that way of teaching, they have to go outside. Um, and so that's, I think we're in a point of transition where it represents a great opportunity to be able to explore more of those kind of outdoor play pedagogy type of opportunities for children in schools. I'm actually kind of interested to see whether, once restrictions start to ease, and I imagine getting kids back to school is going to be one of those really kind of high priority items, whether there might also be a move here to suggest or insist even that classes take place outside. So kind of to be continued. But in any case, I think that there's lots that schools can do, and quite straightforward and simple things that schools can do. There's a lot of really good models for schools, like the Opal Outdoor Play and Learning model that started in the UK and has been done in Canada and in other parts of the world, which essentially, it consists of setting up a framework in the school, kind of a policy guidelines and support and training for teachers, but for the kids to be able to access kind of loose parts on the play space, for teachers and supervisors to receive training on, how do you support children through play, more of a kind of a play worker model rather than kind of a police saying no kind of model. So those sorts of programs are already out there, and they're really rigorously done, very high quality. And so my suggestion would be for schools to access those resources, or even, if nothing else, even joining something like the outdoor school day movement. 2 days a year, it's outdoor classroom day, and so you could register your school to have all the kids outside in outdoor classroom those days, to give you a taster of what that's like. So lots of there's really an abundance of resources, and it's really up to the schools to have the will to be able to kind of take advantage of them.
Okay. I recently wrote an article about allowing outdoor free play during physical education. And the first few weeks that it was out, I got mixed reviews. Some people were extremely on board with the idea, and others were very vocal about that not being a good way to teach. Um, so I wrote this article simply because I think that the outdoors can teach stuff that I can never replicate inside of a gymnasium. Do you think it's a good idea for kids to have free play during school hours?
Yes, absolutely. Free play is absolutely essential for kids. Even if you think about recess, having that time outside to be able to really get away from schoolwork, to hang out with friends, to decompress, to get their kind of energies up, clear their heads, etc. And I think that in terms of pedagogy and things like physical activity or even math or social studies or whatever, that there really are incredible opportunities in the outdoors that teachers can recognize, and that the play and the pedagogy that can happen out there is more creative. It allows for more different kinds of students to be able to do things that engage them. There's an abundance of reasons for teachers to be able to explore some of these opportunities. So I would agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah, just a quick story. I brought students outside, class of 27, and I told them this was during winter time, so there's a bunch of snow hills and everything. And I told the kids, hey, right now it's free play. It's not the real definition of free play. I am forcing them to be active during physical education class. So I said, you guys go out there and you figure out how to stay busy. Three girls started their own game of capture the flag. So they started with 8 players and they finished with 25. But they were the ones who led the game, made the teams, played, refereed. So if I had set up my day to say, today we're playing capture the flag, and I would have led everything, I think I would have robbed them of that leadership opportunity. So I'm a big proponent of active outdoor play. I think when you think of physical literacy, if I tell kids what to do all the time, are they really physically literate? I mean, will they be motivated? So the kids that are used to free play and outdoor play are the ones that are staying busy right now, I believe. If
Hmm.
the ones that are always told to do what to do by their PE teacher or their soccer coach, I think they're probably kind of twirling their thumbs right now, figuring out what to do.
Well, what a great story, because not only was there kind of leadership opportunity there, but here's an opportunity for them to explore, how to get along with their peers, how to make
Mm-hmm.
rules, how to integrate everybody. So we're talking social emotional learning, we're
Mm-hmm.
talking executive functioning, cognitive development, like a multiverse of opportunities that wouldn't have been there had you been leading that game.
Yeah, they don't know it yet, but they're definitely getting an A in phys ed. Anytime someone can do my job, if a student can just do my job for me, they definitely deserve that A. What about risky play inside of a school setting? How does that look? How should it look? What are the barriers, possibly?
Mhm. Well, so I guess for your listeners who don't know what risky play is,
Yeah.
it's basically play. It's exhilarating and thrilling types of play where kids are engaging with uncertainty, and where there's a chance of physical injury. And so, examples of that are things like play at heights, play at speed, play near dangerous elements like fire or water, rough and tumble play, play where there's a chance of getting lost, and so on. And so, what's important to know is that all of the elements of that definition of risky play are key. So it's thrilling and exciting. So kids, or feel like they're pushing themselves hard enough that they get that thrill, but not so hard that it's scary. And they're engaging with uncertainty, right? So they are experimenting. They don't know what's going to happen, when they do something, and that's kind of the point. And I think that and the chance of physical injury are the biggest barriers to
Mm-hmm.
risky play in general, and particularly in schools. And so, like in terms of uncertainty, adults who are in charge of kids, particularly if they're not the parents of those kids, hate uncertainty. And you can understand why. They want to make sure that kids are safe. They want to make sure that parents won't get upset. They want to make sure that there's no liability concerns, and that there's no potential for kind of very harmful things to happen. Um, the thing is that any really outdoor play, as soon as you really let kids play the way they want to play, they will take risks. They need to
Mm-hmm.
take risks. And so limiting their ability to take risks does them a huge disservice, developmentally, physical activity wise, and so on. We know that kids are more active when they're engaged in risky play. They are able to develop resilience and self-confidence and risk management skills, and creativity, and on and on and on. And so if we're making decisions that are centered on the child, then it would be pretty clear that there shouldn't be barriers to risky play in schools. But for all the reasons I already mentioned, like concerns around liability and fears and so on, it's very hard to get those kinds of opportunities in schools. And I think also a lot of outdoor playground environments in schools are quite frankly unstimulating. So you have a gravel field generally, a few pieces of fixed play equipment, and then supervisors who are constantly saying no. And so kids very quickly get bored. I've even talked to my own kids and watched this happen, and it breaks my heart, particularly given the work that I do, where they just stop wanting to have outdoor time and recess because it's so boring, because there's nothing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly with girls, for example, we're very worried about their physical activity levels, and you see this huge drop in kind of late childhood, preteen time, and because we're not giving them interesting opportunities of things to do.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of kind of challenges that we need to deal with in schools. But it's really quite simple when you get right down to it. It's like, you if you let kids play the way they want to play, if you have supervisors who are trained in a way to support kids play that doesn't control it, then magic things can happen. And you can bring in a
Hmm.
few kind of basic loose parts, like sticks, logs, mud, water, sand, crates, tarps, things like that, that kids can move around and kind of let their imagination shape the play. And magic does happen very quickly. As in a good example is actually your story about the capture the flag.
Yeah. We started Loose Parts Play officially 2 years ago, branding it as a Loose Parts Play program. Because obviously, if you're in the teaching game long enough, the names change, but the theories and the practical components of the theory don't really change. So Loose Parts Play has been around, but we've started branding it 2 years ago as Loose Parts Play. And we had two groups of kindergarten kids, and our kindergarten classes are kind of big in Ontario. You're looking at 27 kids. So we had 54 kids doing Loose Parts Play outside. And for 5 minutes, you could hear a pin drop. It was just, they were so into their imaginative, creative play. And I mean, my daughter alone creates a very large amount of noise. So put 54 of them together and they're outside having fun. And for a good 5 minutes, or what it felt like 5 minutes, there was no talking whatsoever. They had done their planning for 15 minutes, chosen their partners, and they just got to work and started creating. So I'm a big believer of the Loose Parts Play.
Hmm.
A few more questions, and then I think that'll be that. Moving forward, what would you like to see from society or schools in regards to play? What needs to change for it to be normal, or what would you
Mm-hmm.
like to see?
Yeah, well, and I guess one of the things that we haven't dealt with yet is the injury side of things, and this kind of overwhelming fear of injuries that paralyzes schools and parents. And so, as I mentioned, I'm an injury prevention researcher, and where we previously kind of focused on keeping kids as safe as possible and getting those injury numbers down. Really, nothing else was important. What we move to now is as safe as necessary, right? And the idea behind that is that you deal with the stuff that is actually really dangerous. So these would be things that kids wouldn't be able to manage on their own, like say broken equipment, or a fast moving river where the kids you're dealing with can't handle that. And a lot of that actually relates a lot to the relationship that teachers have with those kids. So, for example, at the beginning of the year, your kids a lot less, you're going to be a lot more careful with them. And as you get to know them, then you know their capabilities and you can loosen up kind of more in terms of
Mhm.
what you think that they're capable of. So that's the idea behind keeping kids as safe as necessary, and we advocate for a risk benefit assessment approach, rather than a risk assessment approach that only looks at kind of all of the things that go wrong and tries to remove the risk. We want to keep the risk. We want kids to be able to um, be involved in kind of making decisions around risk. And what you want to do is actually deal with the really hazardous stuff. And in terms of
Mhm.
injuries, so while there's this fear that kids will get injured, uh, there the likelihood of death from play is is so unlikely that you're in fact more likely to win Lotto 649 than you are to have a child die from play. So, for example, in the last 17 years of Canadian data, there's been zero instances of children dying from falling from trees, right? There's been,
Mhm.
in 7 years of available data, there's been two instances of children dying from falls from play equipment. And so to kind of give you a context, that's like that's a rate of about 1 in 49 million. Sorry, 2 in 49 million. And so the likelihood of winning Lotto 649 is 1 in 14 million, right? So just like it's just so infinitesimally tiny a likelihood, and yet we've built our societies around avoiding it without recognizing all of the harm that we're doing to children's development. And so, I guess I would like schools to kind of open up their eyes and realize that the, the fear of these things isn't justified by the statistics. Kids do get hurt at play. The vast, vast majority of that is going to be minor injuries, can also be opportunities for them to learn. Even broken arms are generally easily healed, and my orthopedic colleagues at Children's Hospital in BC say they'd rather have the kids out playing and be able to play like they want, rather than worrying about whether they're going to show up in their clinics. So that's a barrier that I would like to dismantle, and we're working towards that. We've developed a risk benefit assessment framework toolkit that's with the Child and Nature Alliance of Canada, that's available on the Outdoor Play Canada website. We're working with insurance companies to try and get that framework recognized so that people can use it, so that the liability issues kind of go down. And for schools to take advantage of the many great programs like the Loose Parts, the OPAL programs, others. Just explore what's out there and have a willingness. And I think they will reap so many rewards from giving the kids these opportunities.
Well, that's a very good answer. If listeners want to know more about you or your work, how can they best reach you?
The easiest thing to do is go to my lab website. It's brussonilab.ca. So BRUSSONI lab.ca. And then there's all the details on our latest work, as well as contact information and so on. So that's the easiest.
Well, thank you so much for being my first guest ever. This is a great chat.
I am honored to be your first guest. Thank you, David.
Oh, thank you. And thanks again for coming by and giving us your expertise and everything.